If the videos are good, I don't care how many you make. Those words rang in my ears like a twisted joke the moment my manager said them, casually, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was day 2 at my new job, and I was still brimming with hope and excitement. Little did I know, those words were the beginning of one of the most grueling and unfair chapters in my life. Back then, in the early 2010s, the world of digital content was just starting to explode. YouTube was becoming a global stage, and the university I was hired for wanted in on that action. They needed fresh, engaging videos to boost their brand, to show they weren't stuck in the past. So they brought me on as their content creator. Just me. No team, no support staff, no assistants. Just me. The salary? Around $2,200 a month. Not exactly generous, especially for the workload they envisioned. But I was young, ambitious, and hungry to prove myself. I thought this was my big break, a chance to showcase my creativity and skills in a real, impactful way. But almost immediately, reality hit me like a truck. On the second day, my manager called me into her office, that same smile plastered on her face, and slid across a KPI so absurd it felt like a bad joke. 85 videos in 52 weeks. More than 1.5 videos a week. And not quick, thrown together clips. These videos needed to be 3 to 10 minutes long, polished, professional, engaging. And guess what? I was expected to do everything by myself. Script writing, producing, casting, filming, composing music, editing, all of it. I was stunned. The university's equipment was a nightmare. The cameras were decades old. The computers couldn't even handle 720p editing without freezing or crashing. So I had no choice but to use my own gear, my own expensive cameras, my own editing software, my own time and energy. I tried to voice my concerns. I explained that this was an impossible workload for one person. That quality would suffer, deadlines would be missed. But she just waved it off, that same patronizing smile returning. If the videos are good, she said, I don't care how many you make. It was meant to sound reassuring, a promise even, but looking back, it was a lie designed to set me up to fail. The first few weeks, she was almost supportive, giving the appearance of a good boss. But the work was overwhelming. I was working 6 days a week, sometimes pulling 60 hours or more. Nights were spent rewriting scripts, tweaking edits, chasing after talent who were hard to pin down. Weekends disappeared under the weight of shooting and post-production. I even composed original music because the university refused to pay for any kind of royalty-free subscription. Every day felt like running a marathon with a backpack full of bricks. I was the entire production machine, from start to finish, all on my own. I remember the endless cycle, scripting, casting, shooting, editing, then starting all over again. The equipment failures, the lost footage, the budget constraints. The stress was relentless. Yet I kept going, driven by a mix of pride and stubbornness. I convinced myself that I was creating something important, that the work would pay off in the end. And sometimes it did. Some of my videos smashed previous view records on the university's YouTube channel, drawing praise from students and faculty. But the praise never came from the people who mattered most. My manager's responses were cold, detached. A simple good was the best I could expect. No thanks, no encouragement, just pressure for the next batch. I was exhausted, stretched thin between creativity and sheer grind. My health started to suffer. I became anxious, always worried about whether I was doing enough, whether I was enough. But quitting was not an option. I was determined to prove that I could handle this impossible task. Looking back, I see now that the manager's quality over quantity line was a trap. While she smiled and encouraged me to try, she was secretly counting every missed video, every late deadline. The impossible quota wasn't just unrealistic, it was a weapon. The first month passed, then 2, then 3. The pressure mounted like a storm, gathering on the horizon. I was drowning in work, and yet the storm was only just beginning. What I didn't know then was that the friendly face of my manager was about to morph into something far colder, far more merciless. That this job, this dream opportunity, was going to become a nightmare where I wasn't just fighting for success, but for survival. Things started to unravel about a month in. At first, I thought maybe I was just imagining it, but then the shift was undeniable. My manager, who had been somewhat supportive, suddenly turned cold. The change was subtle at first, sharp glances, curt replies, but soon it became full-on hostility. And it all started when she found out I was a smoker. I didn't hide it. I'm not ashamed of it, and honestly, I thought it was none of her business. But when the word got out, the atmosphere around me shifted, like the temperature dropping before a storm. One of my colleagues even face-palmed when I told her, warning me that the manager hated smokers and was notorious for targeting them. From that day forward, the manager's attitude became poisonous. She started micromanaging everything I did, nitpicking every detail like she was hunting for reasons to criticize. She complained about the smell of cigarette smoke lingering on me after breaks, even though I made sure to wash my hands and change clothes when I could. She called me out for coming in 5 or 10 minutes late once or twice, despite the fact I was regularly putting in 4 hours of overtime almost every day. She berated me for being unreachable during my breaks, like I was supposed to be glued to my desk 24/7. Every little thing became ammunition. I was exhausted and demoralized, but I kept going. I thought if I worked hard enough, delivered good videos, she would eventually see past all this. But it didn't happen. It wasn't just the manager, either. Some colleagues started to distance themselves, whispering behind my back. The office became a hostile place. I felt isolated, judged, unfairly treated. The worst part was that the standards weren't the same for everyone. I saw other employees get away with missing deadlines, sloppy work, or even tardiness. But when it came to me, every mistake was magnified. It felt like I was carrying a target on my back. One day, during a particularly stressful week, my manager called me into her office again. This time, the warmth was gone, replaced by icy disdain. She accused me of not pulling my weight and falling behind on the video quotas. I tried to explain that the workload was impossible for one person and reminded her of the high views some of my videos had garnered. I also brought up that she herself had said quality mattered more than quantity. She cut me off coldly, saying, "You're not meeting the numbers, that's all that matters." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I realized then that no matter how much I tried, no matter how hard I worked, she had made up her mind. I wasn't just failing her, I was being set up to fail. The discrimination wasn't just personal, it was systemic. I was the scapegoat for the impossible demands she and the director had imposed, and when the pressure mounted, I was the one left holding the bag. Despite the growing hostility, I kept grinding. I was determined not to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. But deep down, I was running out of energy, and the injustice was eating me alive. Looking back, that period was the darkest chapter of my career. The toxic mix of impossible expectations, micromanagement, and discrimination wore me down day by day. It was no longer just about creating videos. It was about surviving in an environment that seemed designed to crush me. But little did my manager know. The story wasn't over. The very system she thought she controlled was about to turn against her. I still remember the sinking feeling when I was called into the director's office 5 months after starting. My manager was there, wearing that all too familiar smug expression, the one that said, "I've been waiting for this moment." My stomach twisted as I walked in, already knowing what was coming, but hoping somehow that I was wrong. The director didn't waste time. She told me, flat and cold, that I was falling behind. Only 30 videos completed out of the 85 expected. Half a year in, and I was nowhere near the target. She said it with disappointment, but it was clear that was just an excuse. The real message was that I was out. I tried to explain, breathless and frustrated. I told her how I'd been working 6 days a week, 60 hours or more, pouring every ounce of energy into the project. I reminded her that the videos I had produced were the most viewed on their YouTube channel ever. I even mentioned that my manager had told me quality mattered more than quantity. But the director just shook her head, unwilling to listen. "You're not meeting the numbers," she repeated. "We need to cut the cord now." I asked what would happen next. How would they meet the KPI without me? The manager sneered. "We'll hire a professional production house to finish your work." The director nodded, her expression unreadable, and said, "You don't have to worry. The manager will get it done." It was like a slap in the face, fired before even reaching halfway, told they'd bring in outsiders to finish my work, as if I was replaceable and disposable. But that's when a dark thought flickered into my mind. If they planned to use production houses to finish my workload, and if I was the one with the database of potential vendors, contacts they didn't have, then maybe I could turn this to my advantage. I went home that night, my mind racing. I pulled out the contact list I'd built over the months. Production houses, freelancers, video experts. I knew my manager had no contacts herself and would rely on this list. So I decided to sabotage it. I went through every entry and changed the email addresses and phone numbers to nonsense, all except one. That one was a friend of mine, a junior director at a small but talented production house. I called him, explained the situation, and pitched an idea. I told him this was a chance to fast-track his career, to land a massive contract that could launch his company into the spotlight. In return, he'd pay me a finder's fee, a solid 15%. He was hesitant at first, but once I laid out the details, 6 months of work, a big budget, and the perfect opportunity, he was in. We shook on it. Within 2 days, my friend's production house was called in to pitch. Thanks to the insider knowledge I shared, the university style, the themes they wanted, the kind of content that worked, they blew the manager and director away. They were a perfect fit, seemingly reading the university's mind. The director and my former manager were stunned, signing the contract on the spot. It was poetic justice. A project that was supposed to be impossible for one person suddenly became achievable with a full team of experts: producers, directors, editors, sound technicians, lighting crews. And yes, it was expensive. The cost was many times my old salary, but the job got done in a fraction of the time. Meanwhile, I sat back and collected my 15% finder's fee, a sum equal to 15 months of my salary. Suddenly, being fired didn't feel like the end. It was a new beginning. I put aside enough money for a holiday, a much-needed break after months of stress, and even planned to enroll in a respected film school overseas. It was a fresh start, a way to turn the bitter taste of betrayal into fuel for my dreams. But the story didn't end there. While I was relaxing on a beach in Bali, I got a call from a former colleague, the same one who had facepalmed when I mentioned my manager's hatred of smokers. She told me the bombshell news: my manager had been fired, and the director was being reprimanded by the university chancellor. The reason? The budget for the entire content creation project had been blown out by more than 10 times. My manager, desperate to prove herself, had thrown caution to the wind, approving massive spending without the director's consent. Payments to my friend's production house and other vendors that were astronomical compared to the original budget. The chancellor was furious. The project had spiraled out of control, and my manager was the scapegoat. In the end, I had not only secured a lucrative payout and a new path for myself, but had also unwittingly triggered the downfall of the very people who tried to sabotage me. My friend's rapid promotion to full director at his production house was the cherry on top. From junior director to full director in record time, thanks to that massive contract. I sat on my balcony in Bali, watching the sunset, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. Sometimes the universe has a way of balancing the scales. Right after I walked out of the director's office, feeling like someone had slammed a door shut on my chest, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, disbelief, bitterness, and burning frustration. They thought firing me would be the end, that it would silence the problem. But they were dead wrong. That moment lit a fire inside me, a fierce determination, not just to survive, but to get back at them in a way they'd never see coming. I was going to turn this firing into the ultimate comeback. I knew exactly where their weakness was. They had no in-house production resources capable of delivering the videos they needed. Their only option was to hire external production companies. But crucially, they had no real contacts, no trusted vendors to rely on. And that was where I held the cards. I controlled their entire database of video production houses and freelancers, the very list they planned to use to finish my work. That night, alone in my small, dimly lit apartment, I sat in front of my laptop, eyes scanning the endless list of contacts I had built painstakingly over months. Hundreds of entries, names, phone numbers, emails. I began my sabotage, systematically replacing phone numbers and email addresses with nonsense, dead ends, dead air. Every single one, except one. The one I left untouched was the contact of a friend, a junior director at a small but hungry production house with talent, drive, and nothing but opportunity ahead of them. I called him immediately, my voice low but steady, explaining everything: the firing, the injustice, the plan. I told him about the huge contract at stake, months of work with a 6-figure budget that could catapult his company to a new level. But it wouldn't be easy. He and his team would have to nail the pitch, prove they were the perfect fit for the university's unique style and needs. In return, I asked for a 15% finder's fee, a fair cut for opening the door. At first, he was hesitant, worried about the risk and pressure. But when I laid out the plan, broke down the details and strategy, his confidence grew. We rehearsed again and again, every word, every slide, every potential question and answer. We practiced until it felt like second nature. 2 days later, they got the call. They were invited to pitch. I watched anxiously from a distance as they walked into the university boardroom, facing my old manager and the director. From the very first slide, it was clear this team understood the university's vision better than anyone before. They spoke the language of the institution, but brought fresh ideas and energy. Every tough question was answered with calm precision. They presented a detailed plan, 50 videos in 4 months, something I had struggled to even imagine achieving alone in a year. The director's skepticism melted into awe. My former manager, who had mocked my failure to meet KPIs, now looked shell-shocked. When the presentation ended, the contract was signed on the spot. My sabotage had worked perfectly. With all other contacts unreachable, they had no choice but to pick the only viable option: my friend's production house. What followed was a whirlwind of activity. The company rapidly mobilized a full professional crew: producers, directors, cinematographers, lighting techs, sound engineers, editors, assistants, working in perfect harmony. The quality skyrocketed. Videos rolled out at a lightning pace, polished, engaging, and exactly what the university had hoped for. But the cost? Astronomical. The university's original budget, roughly equivalent to a year and a half of my old salary, was obliterated. My former manager, desperate to prove the project's success at any cost, threw fiscal caution to the wind, approving exorbitant invoices without the director's consent. Bills piled up. The spending was reckless, but she didn't care. All she wanted was to finish the project and have a win to show the director. Meanwhile, I stayed in the shadows, quietly collecting my finder's fee. When the first payment hit my account, it felt surreal. More than a year's salary, lumped into one tidy sum. Months of work I didn't even have to do. I allowed myself a rare moment of quiet satisfaction. With that money, I finally booked the vacation I'd been dreaming about for years: Bali. The sun, the sea, the escape from the nightmare of the past months. It was a balm to my soul. But I didn't stop there. I invested in my future, applying to a prestigious film school overseas, finally able to afford tuition and living expenses. What had started as a painful firing became a stepping stone to growth, transformation, and new opportunity. Back at the university, the aftermath was brutal. The chancellor discovered the financial disaster. The project's spending had exceeded the budget by more than tenfold. An investigation revealed the reckless spending, the unauthorized approvals, and the desperation that drove it. My former manager was held accountable, fired for gross mismanagement and disregard for protocol. The director, too, was not spared. She faced a severe reprimand, having failed to control the spiraling costs and oversight. The entire leadership was shaken to its core. It was poetic justice. The very people who had tried to crush me had collapsed under the weight of their own greed and desperation. My friend's production house flourished after that. The contract became a launch pad for their rapid growth. From a small, struggling team, they became a respected name in the industry. And true to my promise, my friend was promoted from junior director to full director, his talent finally recognized on a grand scale. Meanwhile, I sat on a beach thousands of miles away, watching the sun dip into the ocean, the salty breeze mixing with the bitter-sweet taste of victory. I hadn't just survived being fired. I had seized control, rewritten the story on my terms, and come out the winner. Sometimes the deepest wounds carve the path for the strongest comebacks. And this was only the beginning of my journey. When the dust finally settled, the fallout was bigger than anyone had expected. The Chancellor's office launched a full audit into the content creation project, and the numbers were staggering. The original budget, carefully calculated to cover roughly a year and a half of my modest salary, had ballooned out of control, exceeding projections by more than 10 times. The university was bleeding money, and all eyes turned sharply toward the leadership who'd allowed this to happen. My former manager, the woman who had turned on me the moment she discovered I smoked, was the first to fall. The audit revealed she had approved every outrageous invoice without consent from the director or the chancellor. Desperate to complete the project and save face, she had thrown caution and the university's money to the wind. Her reckless spending spree left no room for defense. The board had no choice but to terminate her employment for gross mismanagement and abuse of authority. In the academic world, where reputation means everything, this was a career-ending disgrace. But the repercussions didn't stop there. The director, though less directly responsible, was heavily reprimanded by the chancellor. Her failure to oversee the project properly and her blind trust in the manager's assurances came under severe scrutiny. The chancellor's disappointment was palpable. What was meant to be a flagship branding campaign had become a financial nightmare and a PR disaster. The director was forced into early retirement with a tarnished legacy, her once promising career overshadowed by the scandal. The university's content strategy had to be completely overhauled. The scandal shook confidence not only within the institution, but also among students, alumni, and donors who questioned where their tuition and donations had gone. A new team was appointed, with strict oversight and transparent budgeting, to rebuild trust and salvage the campaign. The project that was supposed to elevate the university's profile had, ironically, become the story everyone was talking about, just not in the way anyone wanted. Meanwhile, far away from the chaos, my friend's production house was riding the wave of success. The contract we secured turned out to be a game changer for them. From a small, ambitious team, they quickly expanded, hired new talent, and began attracting bigger clients. My friend was promoted rapidly, finally stepping into the director role he deserved. Our partnership had not only been profitable, but transformative for his career and company. As for me, I took that money, my hard-won prize, and invested in myself. Film school overseas opened doors I'd only dreamed of. The lessons I learned there, combined with the bitter experience of corporate betrayal and triumph, shaped me into a more savvy, resilient, creative professional. The bitterness of being fired faded, replaced by a quiet pride in what I'd turned it into. Sometimes the darkest moments forge the strongest paths forward. What started as a humiliating dismissal became a catalyst for change, not just for me, but for everyone involved. The system that tried to discard me ended up exposed and punished. The underdog who had been underestimated proved his worth and outsmarted those who doubted him. In the end, justice wasn't served through confrontation or bitterness, but through strategy, patience, and a refusal to be broken. I didn't just get my job back, I got my life back on my own terms. And if there's one lesson from this whole ordeal, it's this: never underestimate the power of knowing your value, standing your ground, and playing the long game. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't a shout, it's a slow, deliberate victory no one saw coming.